The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of the Sterling, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Sarah Mitchell pushed through the employee entrance at exactly 5:30, just as she had done every morning for the past 3 years. Her worn sneakers squeaked slightly against the floor as she made her way to the staff room. The shoes had seen better days, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were all she could afford right now. Sarah tied her hair back into a neat ponytail and smoothed down her waitress uniform. The black dress and white apron were impeccably clean, even if they were starting to show signs of wear at the seams. She checked her reflection in the small mirror, making sure she looked presentable. Working at the Sterling meant dealing with the wealthiest people in the city, and appearance mattered here more than anywhere else she had worked. "Morning, Sarah," called out Tom, the head chef, as she passed by the kitchen. He was already prepping vegetables for the lunch service, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Morning, Tom," she replied with a warm smile. Tom was one of the few people at the Sterling who treated her like a human being, rather than just a servant. Most of the wealthy customers barely acknowledged her existence unless they needed something. The restaurant manager, Mr. Pemberton, gathered the morning staff for the daily briefing. He was a tall, thin man with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. "We have several important reservations today," he announced, consulting his tablet. "The mayor will be dining at 1, and we have 3 separate business parties throughout the afternoon. I expect impeccable service from everyone." His eyes landed on Sarah for a moment longer than necessary. She knew what that look meant. As one of the younger waitresses, she often got assigned to the most difficult customers. Mr. Pemberton seemed to think she could handle the abuse better than the older staff members. Or perhaps he just didn't care. The morning shift started quietly enough. Sarah served breakfast to a handful of early diners, mostly business people having meetings over coffee and croissants. She moved efficiently between tables, refilling cups and taking orders with a practiced smile. The work was exhausting, but she needed this job desperately. At 11 o'clock, Mr. Pemberton approached her station. "Sarah, you'll be serving table 7 for lunch. Mr. Richard Blackwood has a reservation at noon. He's a regular customer and a very important man." "Make sure everything is perfect," Sarah nodded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She had heard of Richard Blackwood. Everyone in the city had. He was a real estate mogul worth millions, known for his ruthless business tactics and his equally ruthless treatment of anyone he considered beneath him. Other waitresses had served him before and had come back to the staff room in tears. As noon approached, Sarah prepared table 7 with extra care. She polished the silverware until it gleamed, made sure the crystal glasses were spotless, and arranged the fresh flowers in the center just so. Everything had to be perfect. Richard Blackwood arrived exactly on time, sweeping into the restaurant like he owned it. He was a large man in his early 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sarah earned in 6 months. His gray hair was slicked back, and his cold blue eyes surveyed the restaurant with obvious satisfaction. He was alone, which somehow made Sarah even more nervous. "Good afternoon, sir," Sarah said pleasantly as she approached his table. "Welcome to the Sterling. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you today." Blackwood barely glanced at her. He was already looking at his phone, scrolling through emails with one hand while waving dismissively with the other. "Water, still not sparkling. And bring me a menu." "Of course, sir. I'll be right back with that." Sarah hurried to get his water, making sure the glass was perfectly clean and the water was ice cold, just the way the wealthy customers preferred it. She returned with the menu and placed both carefully on his table. Blackwood took a sip of water and immediately grimaced. "This tastes like tap water. Are you trying to poison me? Bring me bottled water, imported." "I apologize, sir. I'll bring that right away." Sarah kept her voice calm and professional, even though she knew the water had come from the same imported bottles he was requesting. She had poured it herself from the sealed bottle just moments ago. She returned with a new glass, this time bringing the bottle to the table and opening it in front of him. Blackwood didn't even acknowledge the gesture. He was still absorbed in his phone, occasionally grunting as he scrolled through messages. "Are you ready to order, sir? Or would you like a few more minutes?" "Obviously I need more time," he snapped without looking up. "Do you see me reading the menu? Use your brain, girl." Sarah felt her cheeks burn but maintained her composure. "Of course, sir. I'll check back with you shortly." She retreated to her station, trying to ignore the pitying looks from her coworkers. This was going exactly as she had feared. She busied herself with other tasks, checking on her other tables and helping to set up for the afternoon service. After 10 minutes, she returned to Blackwood's table. "Have you decided on your order, sir?" He finally looked up from his phone, his eyes scanning over her with obvious disdain. "What do you recommend?" "Actually, never mind. What would you know about fine dining? You probably eat at fast food restaurants?" Sarah swallowed hard. "The chef's special today is pan-seared sea bass with lemon butter sauce. It's quite popular with our guests." "Fine, I'll have that. And make sure it's cooked properly. Last time I was here, they overcooked my fish. I don't want to send it back again." "I'll make sure the chef knows, sir." "How would you like it cooked?" "Medium rare, obviously." "Are you new here?" "These are basic questions." "I'll put that order in right away, sir." Sarah wrote down the order and headed to the kitchen, her hands shaking slightly. She had been working at the Sterling for 3 years, but customers like Blackwood always made her feel like she was worthless. Tom looked up as she entered. "Blackwood? How did you know?" "I could see it on your face." "Don't let him get to you, Sarah. Guys like him are miserable inside, so they try to make everyone else miserable too." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Tom. He wants the sea bass medium rare. And he said last time it was overcooked." Tom snorted. "Last time he was here, he ordered the steak. I remember because he sent it back 3 times, each time contradicting what he said before. I'll make sure the fish is perfect, don't worry." As Sarah waited for the food to be prepared, she thought about her life outside this restaurant. She was 26 years old and working 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the evenings, she studied online, working toward a degree in social work. She wanted to help people, to make a difference in the world. But right now, she felt small and insignificant. Just another servant for the rich and powerful to abuse. Tom finished preparing the sea bass with his usual expertise. The fish was cooked to perfection, the skin crispy and golden, the flesh tender and flaky. He arranged it artfully on the plate with roasted vegetables and a delicate drizzle of lemon butter sauce. Sarah looked at it and knew it was flawless. Tom never made mistakes. She carried the plate carefully to Blackwood's table, placing it gently in front of him. "Your sea bass, sir. Cooked medium rare as requested." Blackwood didn't thank her. He simply picked up his fork and knife and cut into the fish. Sarah stood nearby, waiting to see if he needed anything else. She watched as he took the first bite, chewed slowly, and then his face contorted into an expression of disgust. "This is garbage," he said loudly, throwing his fork down on the plate with a clatter. Several nearby diners turned to look. Absolutely inedible. "Are you people trying to ruin my lunch?" Sarah felt her heart sink. "I'm so sorry, sir." "What's wrong with it? I can have the chef prepare something else for you." "What's wrong with it?" Blackwood's voice grew louder. "It's overcooked, dry, and tasteless. I specifically said medium rare. This is well done. Can't anyone in this restaurant follow simple instructions?" Sarah knew he was lying. She had watched Tom prepare the dish and it was perfect. But arguing with a customer, especially one as influential as Richard Blackwood, would cost her this job. "I sincerely apologize, sir. Let me take this back and have the chef prepare a new one." "Oh, so now you're going to waste more of my time?" Blackwood leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "I have a business meeting in 45 minutes. I don't have time to wait for your incompetent kitchen staff to figure out how to cook fish." Other customers were openly staring now. Sarah could feel her face burning with embarrassment. Mr. Pemberton was walking toward their table, his expression grave. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Pemberton asked smoothly, directing his question to Blackwood while barely acknowledging Sarah's presence. "Your waitress brought me overcooked fish. I'm beginning to think the Sterling isn't what it used to be. Perhaps I should take my business elsewhere." Mr. Pemberton's face paled slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, I assure you this is highly unusual. We'll of course comp your meal and prepare anything else you'd like free of charge." "Free of charge?" Blackwood laughed coldly. "Do you think money is my concern? I could buy this entire restaurant with what I have in my checking account. The issue is competence, or rather the lack of it." His eyes moved to Sarah, looking her up and down with contempt. "This girl clearly doesn't belong in an establishment like this. She can barely string a sentence together, and she obviously can't communicate properly with the kitchen. Where did you find her? A homeless shelter?" Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Mr. Pemberton shifted uncomfortably, clearly weighing his options. Sarah knew what was coming. "Sarah, perhaps you should take a break. I'll handle Mr. Blackwood's table personally." It was a dismissal, and they both knew it. Sarah nodded silently and walked away, her legs feeling weak beneath her. As she pushed through the kitchen door, she could hear Blackwood still complaining loudly about the service. Tom looked up from his station. "What happened?" He said the fish was overcooked and inedible. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "That's impossible. That fish was perfect, and he knows it." Tom's face reddened with anger. These rich types, they just enjoy making people suffer. It makes them feel powerful. Sarah slumped against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "Mr. Pemberton basically told me to leave the floor. I'm probably going to get written up for this." "That's not fair, Sarah. You did everything right." "Fairness doesn't matter when you're dealing with millionaires," Sarah said bitterly. She had learned that lesson many times over the past 3 years. She stayed in the kitchen for the next 20 minutes, helping Tom with prep work and trying to calm her racing heart. Through the small window in the kitchen door, she could see Mr. Pemberton fawning over Blackwood, bringing him a new dish personally. Whatever he had ordered, Blackwood seemed to find it acceptable, though he still looked irritated. Finally, Mr. Pemberton came into the kitchen. His expression was stern as he approached Sarah. "My office now." Sarah followed him through the narrow hallway to his small office at the back of the restaurant. The room was cramped and cluttered with paperwork, schedules, and supplier invoices. Mr. Pemberton sat behind his desk and gestured for Sarah to remain standing. "That was unacceptable," he began without preamble. "Mr. Blackwood is one of our most valued customers. He spends thousands of dollars here every month. He also happens to own the building this restaurant leases space in." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She hadn't known that detail. "He's extremely unhappy with the service he received today. He specifically mentioned you by name as being incompetent and unsuitable for this position." "Mr. Pemberton, I did exactly what I was supposed to do. Tom prepared that fish perfectly. There was nothing wrong with it. Mr. Blackwood was just looking for a reason to complain." "Are you calling our customer a liar?" Mr. Pemberton's voice was cold. "I'm saying the food was prepared correctly. I saw it myself. What you saw or didn't see is irrelevant. The customer's experience is what matters, and Mr. Blackwood's experience today was clearly subpar." He shuffled some papers on his desk, not meeting her eyes. "I'm giving you a formal written warning. Another incident like this and you're terminated. Understood?" Sarah wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she knew it would be pointless. She needed this job. She had rent to pay, student loans to service, and her mother's medical bills to help with. "Understood," she said quietly. "You can return to the floor." Mr. Blackwood has finished his meal and left. Sarah walked out of the office feeling defeated. She returned to her station and mechanically went through the motions of serving her remaining tables. The other waitresses gave her sympathetic looks but said nothing. They had all been in similar situations before. The afternoon dragged on endlessly. Sarah served business lunches, anniversary celebrations, and casual diners, all while trying to push the morning's humiliation out of her mind. Every time she passed table 7, now occupied by a different customer, she felt a fresh wave of anger and shame. As her shift finally neared its end, Sarah was clearing a table near the window when she overheard 2 businessmen talking at the next table. "Did you hear about the East Side Development Project?" one of them was saying. "Blackwood is trying to buy up all the properties in that neighborhood. He's offering pennies on the dollar, and when people won't sell, he finds ways to force them out." "That's his style," the other man replied. "Remember the Riverside Apartments? He bought that building and immediately raised all the rents by 300%. Half the tenants were elderly people on fixed incomes. They had to leave their homes. The man is ruthless. Brilliant businessman, but absolutely no conscience." Sarah finished clearing the table, her mind churning. So that was Richard Blackwood. Not just a rude customer, but someone who made a habit of crushing people beneath him. The knowledge didn't make her feel any better about the morning's encounter, but it did put things in perspective. At 6 o'clock, Sarah clocked out and changed out of her uniform. Her feet ached and her head was pounding from stress and suppressed tears. As she walked toward the bus stop, she pulled out her phone and saw a message from her mother. "How was work today, sweetheart?" Sarah thought about telling her what had happened, but decided against it. Her mother had enough to worry about with her own health problems. Instead, she typed back, "Just another day. Love you, Mom." The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Sarah stared out the window at the passing city, watching wealthy neighborhoods give way to more modest areas, and finally to her own apartment building in a rundown section of town. The contrast between her world and Richard Blackwood's couldn't have been more stark. Sarah's apartment was small but clean. She lived alone in a one-bedroom unit on the third floor of an old building with no elevator. The paint was peeling in places, and the plumbing made strange noises at night. But the rent was affordable, and the landlord was understanding when she occasionally had to pay a few days late. She dropped her bag by the door and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about her evening class. She was taking an online course in child psychology, one of the requirements for her social work degree. The class started in an hour, which gave her just enough time to make some dinner and review her notes. As she heated up leftover pasta in the microwave, Sarah thought about the path that had led her here. She had grown up in a working-class family, the daughter of a factory worker and a nurse. Her father had died when she was 15, leaving her mother to raise her alone. They had struggled financially, but her mother had always emphasized the importance of education and kindness. Sarah had done well in school and had even been accepted to a good university. But during her sophomore year, her mother had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The medical bills had piled up quickly, and Sarah had been forced to drop out and find work to help support them. She had been working ever since, taking online classes whenever she could afford them, slowly chipping away at her degree. The encounter with Richard Blackwood had stirred up old frustrations. Sarah had always tried to treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their social status or wealth. She believed that everyone had value, that everyone deserved kindness. But people like Blackwood seemed to operate by different rules. To him, people like Sarah were invisible, disposable, worthwhile only as long as they served his needs. Her laptop dinged, reminding her that class was starting. Sarah logged into the virtual classroom and spent the next 2 hours immersed in discussions about childhood trauma and resilience. This was why she worked such exhausting jobs. This was her real purpose. She wanted to help children who were struggling, who came from difficult circumstances, who needed someone to believe in them. After class ended, Sarah worked on an assignment until nearly midnight. By the time she finally crawled into bed, she was too tired to think about Richard Blackwood or the Sterling or any of it. Tomorrow would be another day, another shift, another opportunity to earn the money she needed to build a better future. 3 days passed. Sarah worked her shifts at the Sterling, dealing with demanding customers and trying to stay invisible to Mr. Pemberton's critical eye. She hadn't seen Richard Blackwood again, which was a relief. Maybe he had decided to take his business elsewhere after all. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah was serving lunch to a young couple celebrating their engagement when Mr. Pemberton approached her station. His expression was unreadable. "Sarah, Mr. Blackwood has made another reservation. Table 7 again. Tomorrow at noon. He specifically requested that you serve him." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "He requested me? Why?" "I don't ask our valued customers to explain their preferences," Mr. Pemberton replied coldly. "Just make sure there are no problems this time." "I'm serious, Sarah. I can't afford to lose his business." That night, Sarah barely slept. Why would Blackwood specifically ask for her? Was he planning to complain again, to get her fired? Maybe he enjoyed humiliating people so much that he wanted a repeat performance. The thought made her feel sick. Friday morning arrived too quickly. Sarah got ready for work in a daze, her stomach churning with anxiety. She arrived at the Sterling early and spent extra time preparing table 7. If Blackwood was looking for an excuse to complain, she wouldn't give him one. Everything would be absolutely perfect. At 11:45, Sarah positioned herself near the entrance, watching for Blackwood's arrival. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she clasped them together to steady them. At exactly noon, Richard Blackwood strode through the door, looking as imposing and self-important as ever. "Good afternoon, Mr. Blackwood." Mr. Pemberton greeted him obsequiously. "So wonderful to see you again. Your table is ready, and Sarah will be taking excellent care of you today." Blackwood's cold blue eyes found Sarah across the room. For a moment she thought she saw something calculating in his expression, but it vanished quickly. He simply nodded and walked to his table. Sarah took a deep breath and approached him. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome back to the Sterling." "Water. Still. Imported," he said without looking at her, already absorbed in his phone. "Right away, sir." Sarah brought the water, this time bringing the bottle to the table and opening it in front of him before pouring. Blackwood watched her with an unreadable expression. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few minutes with the menu? I'll have the ribeye steak, medium rare, and tell the chef not to overcook it this time. Of course, sir. We'll make sure it's perfect. Sarah wrote down the order and started to turn away. Wait, Blackwood said, and Sarah froze. Sit down. Sarah stared at him in confusion. I'm sorry, sir? I said sit down. I want to talk to you. This was highly unusual. Waitresses didn't sit with customers, especially during lunch service. Sarah glanced around nervously, catching Mr. Pemberton's eye across the room. He was frowning but didn't intervene. I really should put your order in, sir. The kitchen gets backed up if the order can wait 5 minutes. Sit. Reluctantly, Sarah pulled out the chair across from him and perched on the edge of it, ready to jump up at any moment. Her heart was hammering in her chest. Blackwood finally looked up from his phone, studying her face with unsettling intensity. Do you know why I asked for you specifically today? No, sir. I wanted to see how you would react. After our last encounter, I expected you to request a different assignment. Most people in your position would have, but here you are. Sarah didn't know what to say to that, so she remained silent. I make it a practice to research people who interest me, Blackwood continued. You interest me, Sarah Mitchell? A chill ran down Sarah's spine. How did he know her full name? I don't understand, sir. I had my assistant look into you. You're 26 years old. You've worked at the Sterling for 3 years. You also work evenings at a coffee shop near the university. You're taking online classes, working toward a degree in social work. Your mother has multiple sclerosis and lives in a care facility across town. You visit her every Sunday. Sarah felt violated, exposed. This man had been investigating her, digging into her private life. Why would you do that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I wanted to understand something, Blackwood said. When I insulted you, when I humiliated you in front of the entire restaurant, you didn't fight back. You didn't argue or make excuses. You simply took it. Why? Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, pushing past her fear. Because I need this job. Because people like me don't get to fight back against people like you. Because the world doesn't work that way. Exactly, Blackwood said, leaning back in his chair. The world doesn't work that way. Do you know how I built my fortune, Sarah? I have some idea, she replied, thinking about the conversation she had overheard about the East Side development. I stepped on people. I took advantage of every weakness, every vulnerability. I crushed anyone who got in my way. That's how you succeed in business. That's how you win. Sarah stood up abruptly. If you'll excuse me, sir, I need to put your order in. I'm not finished, Blackwood said, but Sarah was already walking away. Her whole body was trembling with suppressed emotion. She pushed through the kitchen doors and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Tom looked over from his station. You okay? What happened? He's insane, Sarah managed. He had someone investigate my whole life. My mom, my school, everything. That's creepy as hell. You should report him. Report him to who? He owns the building. Mr. Pemberton would fire me before he'd do anything to upset Blackwood. Sarah straightened up, trying to compose herself. Just make his steak. Medium rare. Perfect. I want to give him his food and get him out of here. Tom prepared the ribeye with extra care, perhaps sensing how important it was that nothing go wrong this time. Sarah waited in the kitchen longer than necessary, dreading her return to Blackwood's table. When the steak was ready, perfectly cooked and beautifully plated, she carried it out with steady hands despite her inner turmoil. Your ribeye, sir, she said, placing the plate in front of him. She started to turn away immediately, but Blackwood spoke again. I wasn't finished with our conversation. I don't think we have anything more to talk about, sir, Sarah replied, keeping her voice professional but firm. You're angry with me. Good. At least you have some fire in you. Blackwood cut into his steak, and Sarah noted with grim satisfaction that it was cooked perfectly. He took a bite and nodded. Excellent, see? When you communicate properly with the kitchen, they can do their job correctly. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. They both knew the first meal had been perfect, too. This was all some kind of game to him, and she was the unwilling participant. Sit down again, please. The addition of please was jarring coming from him. I have other tables to attend to. They can wait. This is important. Something in his tone made Sarah pause. Against her better judgment, she sat down again, though she remained perched on the edge of the chair, ready to leave at any moment. Blackwood continued eating his steak, taking his time as if gathering his thoughts. Finally he spoke. 23 years ago, I was where you are now. Not literally, of course. I wasn't a waiter. But I was broke, struggling, trying to build something from nothing. Sarah found this hard to believe. Everything about Richard Blackwood screamed old money, inherited wealth, privilege. You don't believe me, he observed, reading her expression. I don't blame you. I've worked hard to erase that version of myself. But it's true. I grew up in poverty. My father was an alcoholic who left when I was 6. My mother cleaned houses to keep us fed. We lived in a one-room apartment in the worst part of the city. He paused, taking a sip of water. Sarah remained silent, unsure where this was going. When I was 17, my mother got sick. Cancer. The medical bills destroyed us. I had to drop out of school to work, to try to pay for her treatment. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough when you're poor. She died when I was 19, and I was left with nothing but debt and rage. Sarah felt a flicker of unwanted sympathy. I'm sorry about your mother. Don't be. Her death taught me the most important lesson of my life. Being poor is a choice. Being powerless is a choice. I decided I would never be either of those things again. The sympathy evaporated instantly. Being poor isn't a choice, Sarah said sharply. That's the most privileged, ignorant thing I've ever heard. Blackwood's eyes flashed, but not with anger. With something that might have been approval. You see, that's what makes you interesting. You have spirit. You're not completely broken yet. I'm not broken at all, Sarah retorted. I'm working 2 jobs and going to school. I'm taking care of my mother. I'm building a better life. Just because I'm not rich doesn't mean I'm broken. No, Blackwood agreed. But the world will break you eventually if you let it. It breaks everyone who refuses to play the game. What game? The game of power. Money is power. Power is everything. You can be as kind and good as you want, but without power, your kindness means nothing. It changes nothing. Sarah stood up again. I don't agree with that at all. Kindness matters. Helping people matters. Not everything is about money and power. Really? Then why are you here taking abuse from people like me? Why didn't you tell me off when I insulted you? Because you need money. Because without it, you can't help your mother. You can't finish school. You can't achieve any of your goals. Money is the foundation of everything, whether you want to admit it or not. Sarah hated that he had a point. I need to get back to work. Wait. Blackwood reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He slid it across the table toward her. I have a proposition for you. Sarah stared at the card without touching it. I'm not interested in any proposition from you. You haven't heard it yet. I'm starting a new foundation. A charitable organization focused on helping young people from disadvantaged backgrounds pursue higher education. I need someone to run it, someone who understands what it's like to struggle, someone who genuinely wants to help people. Sarah's mind reeled. This had to be some kind of trick. Why would you start a charity? That doesn't fit with anything you've said about power and money. Because I'm getting older and I'm starting to think about legacy. What's the point of accumulating all this wealth if I take it to the grave? Besides, there are significant tax advantages to charitable foundations. He smiled coldly. Don't mistake this for pure altruism, Sarah. Everything I do serves a purpose. I don't want your charity job, Sarah said firmly. The salary is $150,000 a year, plus benefits, full health coverage for you and your mother, budget to give away millions to students who need it. Sarah felt dizzy. That kind of money would change her life completely. She could finish school full-time. She could afford better care for her mother. She could actually make a real difference in young people's lives. Why me? She asked suspiciously. You don't know anything about me except what your assistant dug up. There are hundreds of qualified people who could run a foundation. True. But they don't have what you have. You have hunger, drive. You haven't been corrupted by wealth or worn down by poverty. You're at that perfect point where you still believe you can make a difference. That's what this foundation needs. I don't trust you, Sarah said bluntly. Smart. You shouldn't trust me. I'm not a good man, Sarah. I've destroyed lives to build my empire. But that doesn't mean I can't do some good with the fortune I've accumulated. Take the card. Think about it. Sarah picked up the card more out of shock than agreement. Richard Blackwood's name was embossed in gold letters along with a phone number and email address. I'll think about it, she said carefully. But I'm not making any promises. That's all I ask. Now I need to finish my lunch. You can go back to your other tables. Sarah walked away from table 7 in a daze. The entire interaction felt surreal. Was this really happening? Could Richard Blackwood actually be serious about this foundation? And even if he was, could she really work for someone who had treated her so terribly? She served her remaining tables mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When Blackwood finished his meal and left, he didn't speak to her again. He simply paid his bill, leaving a $100 tip, and walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. Mr. Pemberton approached her as she was clearing the table. That seemed to go better than last time. I suppose, Sarah replied noncommittally. Mr. Blackwood mentioned to me that he was very pleased with the service today. Whatever you did, keep doing it. Mr. Pemberton walked away before Sarah could respond. That evening, after her shift ended, Sarah sat on the bus with Blackwood's business card in her hand. She turned it over repeatedly, studying it as if it might reveal some hidden truth. $150,000 a year. The number kept echoing in her mind. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning. But could she really work for someone like Richard Blackwood? He had humiliated her, investigated her private life without permission, and openly admitted to destroying people's lives for profit. Even if he was serious about the foundation, what would that say about her if she accepted? On the other hand, if the foundation was real, she could help so many people. Students who were in the same situation she had been in, forced to choose between education and survival. With millions of dollars to distribute, she could change lives. Wasn't that worth swallowing her pride? Sarah visited her mother on Sunday as she did every week. Martha Mitchell lived in a modest care facility on the outskirts of the city. The multiple sclerosis had progressed over the years, limiting her mobility and requiring more assistance with daily tasks. Despite everything, Martha remained cheerful and optimistic, always more concerned about Sarah's well-being than her own. You look tired. Sweetheart, Martha observed as Sarah settled into the chair beside her bed. The room was small but comfortable, decorated with family photos and Martha's beloved collection of porcelain figurines. Are you working too much? I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with school and work. Sarah had debated whether to tell her mother about the job offer from Richard Blackwood. Part of her wanted advice, but another part didn't want to burden Martha with the decision. How are your classes going? Really well. I got an A on my last paper about childhood trauma interventions. Martha beamed with pride. That's wonderful, honey. Your father would be so proud of you. Following your dreams despite everything. The mention of her father made Sarah's chest tighten. He had died from a heart attack when she was 15, sudden and unexpected. One day he had been healthy, going to work at the factory like always, and the next he was gone. The loss had devastated their small family and thrust them into financial insecurity. Mom, can I ask you something? Sarah found herself saying. Of course, dear. If someone offered you an opportunity that could change your life, but that person had done something terrible to you before, would you take it? Martha studied her daughter's face carefully. That's a very specific hypothetical. Does this have something to do with your work? Sarah sighed and told her mother everything. The initial humiliation from Richard Blackwood, the investigation into her private life, and finally the unexpected job offer. She watched Martha's expressions shift from anger to concern to thoughtful consideration. $150,000, Martha repeated when Sarah finished. That's life-changing money, Sarah. I know. That's what makes it so hard. If I take the job, I'm essentially letting him get away with how he treated me. I'm rewarding bad behavior. Or, Martha said slowly, you're taking an opportunity to help people, which is what you've always wanted to do. Sometimes in life, we have to work with imperfect people to achieve good things. The question isn't whether Richard Blackwood is a good person. The question is whether you can use his resources to make a positive difference. But what if this is all some kind of game to him? What if he's just doing this to feel better about himself? Or for tax purposes, like he said? Does his motivation really matter if the outcome is helping young people get an education? You would be the one running the foundation. You would control how the money gets distributed. His reasons for creating it are less important than what you do with it. Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing her mother's words. You think I should take the job? I think you should at least explore it. Meet with him. Get the details. See if this is legitimate. You don't have to make any commitments right away. What if working for him changes me? What if I become like him, focused only on money and power? Martha reached out and took Sarah's hand. Her grip was weak from the disease, but her touch was warm and reassuring. You're not going to become like him, sweetheart. You have too much of your father's kindness in you. And mine too, I hope. Money doesn't change who you are at your core. It just amplifies what's already there. They talked for another hour about other things, lighter topics that didn't require such heavy contemplation. When Sarah finally left the care facility, she felt somewhat clearer about what she needed to do. She would at least investigate the opportunity. She owed herself that much. Monday morning, Sarah called the number on Richard Blackwood's business card. A polished professional voice answered. Blackwood Enterprises, how may I direct your call? I'd like to speak with Mr. Blackwood, please. This is Sarah Mitchell. One moment, Ms. Mitchell. The hold music was classical and soothing. Sarah paced around her small apartment, her heart racing. What was she doing? Before she could second-guess herself further, the line clicked. Sarah, I wondered if you would call. Blackwood's voice was crisp and businesslike, completely different from his tone at the restaurant. I want to know more about this foundation. If it's real, if you're serious about it, I'm interested in learning the details. Excellent. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10? We'll discuss everything. I work tomorrow at 10. Call in sick or quit. If you take this position, you won't need that waitressing job anymore. Sarah bristled at his presumptuous tone. I'm not quitting my job until I know this is legitimate. Can we meet after 5? There was a pause. Sarah suspected Richard Blackwood wasn't used to people dictating terms to him. Fine, 5:30. I'll send you the address. I have it on your business card. That's my corporate headquarters. I'll send you the address of my personal office. It's more private. He hung up without saying goodbye. Sarah stared at her phone, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake, but it was too late to back out now. She had set the meeting in motion. Tuesday dragged by slowly. Sarah worked her shift at the Sterling, going through the motions while her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about what Martha had said. Maybe she could use Blackwood's resources for good without compromising her own values. Maybe this was the opportunity she had been working toward all these years. At 5 o'clock, she clocked out and changed into the nicest outfit she owned, a simple navy dress that she usually reserved for job interviews. She took the bus across town to the address Blackwood had sent her. It was in an exclusive neighborhood where she had never been before, a high-rise building with a doorman and marble floors. The doorman checked her name against a list and directed her to the top floor. Sarah rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. The doors opened onto a private lobby with only one door. Before she could knock, it swung open. Richard Blackwood stood there dressed more casually than she had seen him before, in slacks and a button-down shirt without a tie. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Come in. The office was enormous, taking up the entire top floor of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. The furnishings were elegant and expensive, but not ostentatious. Everything spoke of wealth, but restrained, tasteful wealth. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea, water? Water would be fine, thank you. Blackwood poured water from a crystal pitcher into 2 glasses and handed her one. He gestured to a seating area near the windows. Please sit. Let's talk about the foundation. Sarah sat on a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Blackwood sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp and attentive. First, let me be clear about something, he began. This foundation is not a whim. I've been planning it for over a year. I've already allocated $50 million as the initial endowment. The paperwork is nearly complete. I've hired lawyers to set up the legal structure. This is happening whether you're involved or not. Then why do you need me specifically? Because I need someone to run it who actually cares about the mission. I could hire any number of nonprofit professionals, but they would see it as just another job. You would see it as a calling. That makes all the difference. What exactly would my role be? You would be the executive director. You would have full authority to make decisions about which students receive funding, how much they receive, and what programs we support. I wouldn't interfere with those decisions. You would also hire your own staff, within a reasonable budget. The foundation would cover operational costs separately from the endowment. Sarah's mind was reeling. This was bigger than she had imagined. Why wouldn't you want control over how the money is distributed? It's your money. Once it goes into the foundation, it's not my money anymore. That's the whole point. And honestly, I don't have time to manage the day-to-day operations. I have my own businesses to run. I need someone I can trust to handle it properly. You barely know me. How can you trust me? Blackwood leaned forward slightly. I've made my fortune by reading people, Sarah. I'm very good at it. When I insulted you at the restaurant, I was testing you. I wanted to see how you would react under pressure, how you would handle someone more powerful than you treating you unfairly. That's a terrible way to test someone, Sarah said angrily. Perhaps, but it was effective. You maintained your composure. You didn't lash out or crumble. You did your job professionally despite being humiliated. That tells me you have emotional intelligence and resilience. Those are essential qualities for this position. Sarah stared at Blackwood, trying to process what he had just admitted. You humiliated me on purpose? As a test? Yes, and you passed. Most people would have either fought back and lost their job, or been so devastated they couldn't continue. You found a middle path. You survived. He took a sip of water. I need someone who can survive in difficult situations because running a foundation isn't as simple as just giving away money. There will be difficult decisions, people you have to say no to, critics who question every choice you make. You need to be tough. I'm not sure whether to be insulted or impressed by your logic, Sarah admitted. Be both. That's appropriate. Blackwood stood and walked to his desk, returning with a thick folder. These are the preliminary documents for the foundation. Take them home. Review them with a lawyer if you want. I'm not asking you to sign anything today. I'm simply showing you that this is real. Sarah took the folder, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it and saw legal documents, financial statements, architectural plans for an office space. This was indeed real. Blackwood had already invested significant time and resources into creating this foundation. The foundation will be called Second Chance Educational Trust, Blackwood continued. The mission is to provide full scholarships to students from low-income backgrounds who show academic promise and genuine commitment to their education. We'll cover tuition, books, housing, and provide a living stipend. No student should have to choose between working full-time and finishing their education the way you have. Something in his voice made Sarah look up sharply. Is that what you had to do? When your mother was sick? Yes, I worked 3 jobs to try to pay for her treatment and keep us housed. I was exhausted all the time. I couldn't focus. I made mistakes. Eventually, I had to drop out of school entirely because I couldn't do both. It was the worst period of my life. But you obviously did okay in the end, Sarah observed, gesturing at the luxurious office surrounding them. I did, but it took me 15 years of brutal work to claw my way up. And I had to become someone I'm not particularly proud of in the process. If I had been able to finish my education, maybe I could have achieved the same success without sacrificing quite so much of my humanity. This was the most honest Blackwood had been with her. Sarah saw something in his eyes that looked almost like regret, but it vanished quickly, replaced by his usual calculating expression. I know you're skeptical of my motives, he said. You should be. I'm not doing this out of pure altruism. Part of it is legacy. Part of it is tax strategy. Part of it is because I'm getting older and I'm tired of being known only as a ruthless businessman. But does any of that really matter if the outcome is helping hundreds of young people get an education? My mother said something similar, Sarah admitted. Your mother sounds wise. How is she doing, by the way? With her condition? As well as can be expected. The facility she's in is decent, but it's not great. I wish I could afford somewhere better. If you take this job, you could. The health benefits package includes coverage for dependents. You could move her to one of the premier facilities in the city. They have specialized MS care programs. Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to let him see her cry. You really did your research, didn't you? I told you. I don't do anything halfway. Blackwood returned to his seat. I understand this is a big decision. Take your time. Review the documents. But I do need an answer within 2 weeks. If you decide not to take the position, I'll need to begin interviewing other candidates. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. Why did you become so ruthless? After your mother died, you could have used that pain to become someone who helps people, who makes the world better. Instead, you became someone who hurts people to get ahead. Why? Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was harder, colder. Because being kind doesn't pay the bills. Being compassionate doesn't win in business. I tried being a good person and it got me nowhere. The world rewards ruthlessness, not kindness, so I became ruthless. But now you're creating a foundation to help people. That's an act of kindness. No, it's an act of pragmatism. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The tax benefits of a charitable foundation are substantial. And when I die, I'd rather be remembered for something other than the buildings I built and the people I crushed. That's not kindness. That's strategy. Sarah stood up, clutching the folder to her chest. I need to think about this. I'll have an answer for you by the end of next week. Fair enough. Blackwood walked her to the elevator. Sarah, I know I'm not a good man. I know I've done terrible things to achieve my success. But this foundation could be genuinely good. And I think you're the right person to ensure that it fulfills its mission. Don't let your personal feelings about me prevent you from doing something important. The elevator doors closed and Sarah descended back to ground level, her mind spinning. She spent the entire bus ride home reviewing the documents. Everything appeared legitimate. The financial commitments, the legal structure, the mission statement. This was real. Over the next week, Sarah barely slept. She took the documents to a lawyer who worked at the legal aid clinic where she volunteered. The lawyer reviewed everything and confirmed that it was all legitimate and properly structured. The foundation was real. The job offer was real. The $150,000 salary was real. She talked to her mother again, who encouraged her to take the opportunity. She talked to Tom at the restaurant, who thought she would be crazy to turn down that kind of money. She even talked to her academic advisor, who pointed out that running a major foundation would give her invaluable experience for her future career in social work. Everyone she consulted told her the same thing. This was an incredible opportunity. She should take it, but Sarah couldn't shake her fundamental discomfort with Richard Blackwood. Could she really work for someone who had humiliated her as a test? Someone who openly admitted to destroying lives for profit? Someone who saw charity not as a moral imperative but as a strategic move? On the other hand, she kept thinking about all the students she could help. Kids like she had been, forced to choose between education and survival. With this foundation, she could give them a chance she never had. Wasn't that worth working with someone morally compromised? Friday arrived, marking exactly 1 week since her meeting with Blackwood. Sarah sat in her apartment, the job offer documents spread out on her coffee table. She had to make a decision. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Sarah answered hesitantly. Hello? Ms. Mitchell? This is Presbyterian Hospital. Your mother has been admitted to the emergency room. You should come right away. Sarah's blood ran cold. What happened? Is she okay? The doctor will explain everything when you arrive. Please come as soon as possible. Sarah grabbed her keys and ran out of her apartment. She couldn't afford a taxi, so she took the bus, willing it to go faster, her heart pounding with fear. What if this was it?
What if her mother was dying?
The MS had been progressing, but it had been stable recently. What could have happened? When she finally reached the hospital and found her mother's room in the emergency department, a doctor was standing beside the bed. Martha was conscious but looked pale and weak. Mom! Sarah rushed to her side, taking her hand. I'm okay, sweetheart, Martha said weakly. Just gave everyone a little scare. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Chen. Your mother had a severe MS flare-up. Her symptoms worsened rapidly, and she experienced temporary paralysis in her lower extremities. We've stabilized her with medication, but she's going to need more intensive care going forward. What does that mean? Sarah asked, fear gripping her chest. It means the care facility where she currently resides may not be equipped to handle her needs anymore. We recommend transferring her to a facility that specializes in advanced MS care. Unfortunately, most of those facilities are quite expensive and may not be covered by her current insurance. Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She couldn't afford a specialized facility. She was already stretched thin financially, just covering the basic care facility and her mother's medications. How could she possibly pay for more intensive care? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Chen added gently, I can have our social worker come speak with you about financial assistance options. But I want to be honest with you. The wait lists for subsidized specialized care are typically 6 months to a year long. Sarah nodded numbly, unable to speak. Her mother squeezed her hand weakly. Sarah sat beside her mother's hospital bed through the night, holding her hand and watching her sleep. The doctor's words kept echoing in her mind. Specialized care facility, expensive. 6-month to 1-year wait list for assistance. She did the math in her head over and over, but the numbers never worked out. There was no way she could afford what her mother needed. By morning, Martha was feeling slightly better, though still weak. "You should go home and rest, sweetheart," she said. "You've been here all night." "I'm not leaving you, Mom. I'm fine now. The doctors have me on new medication. I just need to rest." Martha studied her daughter's exhausted face. "You're thinking about the money, aren't you?" Sarah couldn't lie to her mother. "Yes, I don't know how we're going to afford this. You could take that job with Richard Blackwood. Didn't you say the health benefits would cover me?" "Mom, I can't make a decision this important based on a medical emergency. What if I take the job and regret it? What if working for him compromises everything I believe in?" Martha squeezed her daughter's hand with what little strength she had. "Sarah, I've watched you struggle for years. You've sacrificed so much for me already. You dropped out of school. You work yourself to exhaustion. You've put your whole life on hold because of my illness. Don't let me be the reason you turn down this opportunity. It's not about you being a burden. You're my mother. I want to take care of you. And I want you to take care of yourself too. This foundation job is what you've been working toward. A chance to help people, to use your education to make a real difference. If it also happens to provide better care for me, that's just an added benefit." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Take the job, Sarah. Not for me, but for yourself and for all those students you can help." Sarah left the hospital that morning with a decision made. She was terrified it was the wrong one, but she couldn't see any other path forward. Her mother needed help. Students needed help. And somehow Richard Blackwood's ruthless fortune had created an opportunity to provide that help. She called Blackwood's office from the hospital parking lot. His assistant put her through immediately. "Sarah, I was beginning to think you weren't going to call. I'm taking the job," Sarah said without preamble. "But I have conditions. I'm listening. First, I want complete autonomy over scholarship decisions. You don't get to interfere or override my choices. Second, I want everything in writing. The salary, the benefits, the operational budget, all of it. Third, if I ever feel like you're using this foundation for purposes other than helping students, I walk away, no matter what it costs me personally." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Blackwood's voice came back, sounding almost amused. "Agreed. My lawyers will draw up a contract with all those provisions. Can you start in 2 weeks? I'll need 3 weeks. I have to give proper notice at my current jobs. 2.5 weeks. I'm not a patient man, Sarah. Welcome to Second Chance Educational Trust. I think you're going to do excellent work." He hung up before she could respond. Sarah sat in her car, staring at her phone, wondering what she had just agreed to. But there was no time for second-guessing now. She had made her choice. The next 2.5 weeks passed in a blur. Sarah gave notice at both the Sterling and the coffee shop. Mr. Pemberton seemed disappointed to lose her, though he tried to hide it. Tom was genuinely happy for her and made her promise to stay in touch. Her co-workers at the coffee shop threw her a small goodbye party, excited that someone who had worked so hard was finally getting a break. Throughout this period, Sarah visited her mother daily at the hospital and then at the new specialized care facility that Blackwood's health insurance had made possible. The difference was remarkable. Martha had her own spacious room with large windows overlooking a garden. The staff was attentive and specialized in MS care. The physical therapy program was comprehensive. For the first time in years, Martha seemed comfortable and well cared for. "This is all because of your new job," Martha said during one visit. "You made the right choice, Sarah." "I hope so. Mom, I really hope so." On her first day at Second Chance Educational Trust, Sarah arrived at the Foundation's offices in a renovated historic building downtown. The space was beautiful, with high ceilings, natural light, and modern furnishings that somehow blended perfectly with the building's original character. Nothing like the cramped, dingy offices of other nonprofits where she had volunteered. Blackwood was waiting for her in what would be her office. It was spacious and bright, with a large desk, comfortable seating area, and bookshelves waiting to be filled. "What do you think?" he asked. "It's almost too nice," Sarah admitted. "I feel guilty having so much space when that money could go to students." "The office space is a business expense, separate from the scholarship endowment. You need a professional environment to do this work effectively. Don't feel guilty about having what you need to succeed. He handed her a tablet. This contains everything you need to get started. Financial accounts, application systems, staff hiring recommendations. I've also arranged for you to meet with the board of directors next week. They're all successful business people who understand philanthropy. They'll provide oversight, but they won't interfere with your day-to-day decisions. When do the applications open? Whenever you say they do. This is your operation now, Sarah. I'm just the money behind it. Over the next 3 months, Sarah threw herself into building the foundation from the ground up. She hired a small staff of 3 people, an operations manager, an application coordinator, and a financial officer. Together, they developed a comprehensive application process that looked beyond just grades and test scores to identify students who truly needed help and had the drive to succeed. The response was overwhelming. When they opened applications, they received over 5,000 inquiries in the first week alone. Sarah read each one personally, staying late into the evenings, learning the stories of young people across the region who were struggling to pursue their education. There was Marcus, a 19-year-old whose parents had died in a car accident, leaving him to raise his 3 younger siblings while trying to finish community college. There was Aisha, a brilliant science student whose family had fled Syria and were living in refugee housing while rebuilding their lives. There was James, who had aged out of foster care and was working 3 jobs to afford night classes at the local university. Each story broke Sarah's heart and reinforced why this work mattered. These weren't statistics or abstract concepts. These were real people with real dreams who just needed someone to believe in them and give them a chance. In the first year, Second Chance Educational Trust awarded full scholarships to 50 students. Sarah personally called each one to tell them they had been selected. The reactions ranged from shocked silence to tears of joy to disbelief. Several students asked if this was a prank. When Sarah convinced them it was real, their gratitude was overwhelming. Blackwood kept his word about not interfering. Sarah saw him only occasionally, at quarterly board meetings where she presented updates on the foundation's progress. He sat quietly during these meetings, asking few questions, letting her run the show. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an unreadable expression, but he never criticized or tried to override her decisions. As the foundation's reputation grew, Sarah began receiving recognition in nonprofit circles. She was invited to speak at conferences about innovative approaches to educational philanthropy. Local news stations ran stories about Second Chance Educational Trust and the lives it was changing. Sarah's face became associated with the foundation more than Blackwood's, which seemed to suit him fine. One evening, almost exactly 1 year after she had started the job, Sarah was working late in her office when Blackwood appeared at her door. This was unusual. He rarely came to the foundation offices, preferring to communicate through email or phone calls. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course. Come in." Sarah gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Blackwood sat down, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. "I wanted to tell you something. I probably should have told you this months ago, but I wasn't sure how you'd react." Sarah's guard went up immediately. "What is it? Do you remember how I told you I researched you before offering you this job?" "Yes, you had your assistant investigate my background." "That was true, but it wasn't the complete truth. I didn't just have someone look into your background. I had known about you for years before I ever walked into the Sterling." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Blackwood leaned forward, his hands clasped together. 23 years ago, when my mother was dying of cancer, we had a nurse who came to our apartment 3 times a week. She was kind to us when everyone else had given up. She would sit with my mother for hours, talking to her, reading to her, making her laugh even when she was in terrible pain. She did all this for very little money, in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city, because she genuinely cared about helping people. Sarah felt her heart begin to pound. She knew where this was going before he said it. "That nurse was your mother, Sarah, Martha Mitchell. I was 17 years old and angry at the world, but your mother showed me what compassion looked like. She was the only person during that horrible time who treated us with dignity." "You knew," Sarah whispered. "This whole time you knew who I was. The job offer, the foundation, all of it. Was because I've owed your mother a debt for 23 years, Blackwood finished. When I made my fortune, I tried to find her to thank her, to repay her kindness, but she had moved, gotten married, changed her name. I lost track of her. Then 3 years ago, when I was looking into purchasing the building where the Sterling operates, I saw the staff files. Your employment application listed your mother as Martha Mitchell, formerly Martha Reeves, living in a care facility with multiple sclerosis. Sarah couldn't breathe. This entire past year, everything she had accomplished, it hadn't been because of her own merit. It had been charity, pity, repayment of an old debt. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Why did you make me think I earned this position?" "Because you did earn it," Blackwood said firmly. "Yes, I created the foundation partly to repay your mother's kindness, but I chose you to run it because you were the right person for the job. Everything you've accomplished this year, every student you've helped, every program you've developed, that was all you, Sarah. I just provided the resources. You manipulated me. You tested me at the restaurant, pretended you didn't know who I was, made me think this was some random opportunity. How am I supposed to trust anything about this now? You're not supposed to trust me. I've told you from the beginning that I'm not a good man, but look at what you've built. Look at the lives you've changed. Does it really matter how it started if the outcome is genuine good being done in the world?" Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need to think. I need to process this." "Please leave." Blackwood stood slowly. "I understand. Take whatever time you need. But Sarah, for what it's worth, your mother saved my life in a way. She showed me that kindness existed in the world, even in the darkest times. I've spent most of my adult life forgetting that lesson, but it never completely left me. This foundation, you running it, it's my way of honoring what she gave me when I needed it most." After he left, Sarah sat in her office for hours, staring at the wall. Everything she thought she knew had shifted. The job she was so proud of, that she had worked so hard at, had been based on a connection she never knew existed. Part of her wanted to quit immediately, to walk away and find something she had earned entirely on her own merit. But then she thought about Marcus, who had just finished his first semester with straight A's while still caring for his siblings. She thought about Aisha, who was thriving in her engineering program and talking about becoming a doctor. She thought about James, who had sent her a heartfelt thank you letter saying the scholarship had literally saved his life. She thought about her mother, who had spent her career helping people without expectation of reward or recognition. Martha had shown kindness to a desperate teenager and his dying mother decades ago, not because she wanted anything in return, but simply because it was the right thing to do. And somehow, through a strange twist of fate, that kindness had circled back to provide for Martha in her own time of need. Maybe that was the secret gift her mother had always possessed, not wealth or power or connections, but the simple, profound ability to see the humanity in everyone, to offer compassion without judgment, to help without expecting anything in return. And maybe, just maybe, that gift had been passed down to Sarah. By the time dawn broke through her office windows, Sarah had made her decision. She would stay, not because she owed Richard Blackwood anything, and not because the job had been handed to her through her mother's ancient act of kindness. She would stay because the work mattered, because those students needed her, and because she could do genuine good in this role. But things would be different now. She would run the foundation on her terms, with complete transparency about its origins. She would honor her mother's legacy not by pretending it didn't exist, but by living up to the example of compassion and service Martha had always demonstrated. Sarah picked up her phone and called Blackwood. He answered on the first ring as if he had been waiting. "I'm staying," she said, "but we're making some changes. First, we're renaming the foundation. It's going to be called the Martha Mitchell Educational Trust. Second, we're going to tell this story publicly. The real story of how it started. People should know that this foundation exists because a nurse showed compassion to a dying woman and her son 30 years ago." "Agreed," Blackwood said without hesitation. "Whatever you want." "And third, you're going to match your initial $50 million endowment. $100 million total. If we're going to honor my mother's legacy, we're going to do it right." There was a pause. Then Blackwood laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that Sarah had never heard from him before. "You're learning to negotiate. I like it. Done. The additional funding will be transferred by end of week." After they hung up, Sarah walked to the window and looked out at the city waking up below. Somewhere out there, students were getting ready for class, working toward their dreams despite impossible odds. And because of her mother's simple act of kindness 3 decades ago, because of Sarah's determination to honor that legacy, those students would have a chance they might not have had otherwise. Maybe Richard Blackwood was right. Maybe in the end, the motivation behind good deeds mattered less than the deeds themselves. Or maybe her mother was right, and kindness planted in the world always found a way to grow, even if it took decades to bloom. Sarah smiled as the sun rose over the city, feeling for the first time that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Her mother's secret gift had been compassion, and now it was Sarah's gift too, amplified and multiplied, touching hundreds of lives and creating ripples that would extend far into the future. The work was just beginning.